And welcome in everybody to the Landry Football Podcast. I am Chris Landry. Happy to be with you as always. Going to talk a lot about the scouting combine and a little bit of the history of it and take you through that. And we, of course, are always open for all of you that are joining us, be it on Twitch, be it on Twitter, be it on YouTube, be it on Facebook. Want to welcome in a couple of different audiences with our great friends at Maroon Mega Media on their Facebook page. We are reaching out to the Facebook group, and we won't intervene with those fine folks all the time. But we did our first Aggie scouting report today with our Maroon Mega Media folks. We had a little bit of an issue broadcasting on the Facebook groups, on that Facebook group today, and we working a little bit with the Facebook folks today to try to figure it out. And so hopefully at least doing a little bit of a test run to see if this is broadcasting on the Maroon Mega Media Facebook group. So if you are out there, even if it's not your cup of tea and we're not talking Aggies here, at least if you let us know that we've reached it, we'd appreciate that. So we wanted to be able to reach you on that. So welcome to those folks. And I want to invite all of you that have supported me over the years at the Landry Football Podcast to support us into the venture. If you, by chance, are a Texas A&M football fan or like the program, respect the program, join us by following us at Maroon Mega Media on Twitter. And if you would like to join us inside Facebook, you can request to become a member over at Maroon Mega Media. And certainly I think you'll enjoy it as we'll talk a lot of SEC and football in there, not just A&M football, but predominantly A&M football. So anyway, with that out of the way, we appreciate you joining us, our regular audiences. We're going to get into a few things today. I am going to the Combine, so next week we'll not be doing a show here at Landry Football Podcast, but we will return on the 9th of March, and we're going to kind of answer your questions, your pre-Combine questions that you have inside the chat room. We'll get to them. But I want to start by kind of going to the part of how the Combine started and what we do there and how it's changed over the years. Those of you that have joined me on the Landry Football Podcast and LandryFootball.com previously know that I ran the Combine for a few years, and it's operated a lot differently than it's being done now. I'm not saying it's worse or anything or criticizing, but if you probably heard, and on my Maroon Mega Media A&M show, I went over all the guys that are going to be at the Combine from A&M and a bit of a scouting report on all of them. But the Combine was started for one reason and one reason only, for the medical physicals. It was a way to get all the players in one locale and to be able to do all the medicals without having the guys have to crisscross around the country. And it was a very good, I thought, working environment without media, without agents, without anybody involved. I mean, we have a lot of involvement from the aforementioned groups, and they're great. They're a big part of what we do in our game. But this was a forum where we could evaluate players and get a lot done without a lot of interference. Well, over time, and I understand it, with social media like these great forums that we're providing for you today, having access is really important today, and I get that. I understand that. And I do think that having the NFL Network and having the NFL involvement was a big part of the change to where, well, we're going to put it on TV. Now we're going to put it on primetime TV because it's going to make money. I get all that. But what it's done, it's kind of impeded a little bit of what we do and how we do it. I'm sure you've heard there was a big hullabaloo about the bubble, and the players were going to be kept in a bubble and to protect them through this COVID environment. We didn't have a Combine last year, by the way, just to remind you. It's the first one we haven't had since we started this in the mid-'80s. So we thought, at least the Combine folks thought, that are running it now, we're going to put it in a bubble. Well, that means that the agents and the trainers and the people involved were not going to have access to their clients, their players. That didn't go over too well. So they've eliminated that bubble. The bubble is no longer a bubble. We popped the bubble. And so the players are going to have access to their agents and their clients, and we're just going to have to deal with it. And regardless what you think of the COVID environment and the restrictions, that's kind of the way it's going to be. But I'm going to take you back to kind of how this all started. There are two scouting organizations primarily that assist the NFL teams in addition to having their own scouts, and that is National Football Scouting and the Blesto Scouting Combine. I've had the good fortune of working for both. My first job in the league was when I was a college coach at LSU, working for Blesto, and the late Jack Butler, who was a Hall of Fame player for the Steelers, grew up in Pittsburgh and lived in Pittsburgh his entire life. Pardon me. And Jack ran Blesto. The Blesto stands for Bears, Lions, Eagles, Steelers Talent Organization. And as the Vikings joined and they changed the name to Blesto V, and then the Dolphins joined, and then they said, "The hell with this. We're not changing the name every time. We're just going to call it Blesto." And that was the original members. And now you've got Jacksonville. They've got it basically kind of split in half between Blesto members and national members. But the that in national, which national runs when I worked for National Scouting Combine, I ran the Scouting Combine Indy, the Indy portion of it, which is technically the corporate name is National Invitational Camp, which is basically all 32 teams putting in money to have this scouting combine where we bring the best players in, and we put them through the medical physicals. That's the 90% of the reason that we have them there. And then we decided to work them out and do all of that. And again, if you got any questions, we're going to get to it. I see Rich Coaches join us in the chat room, and we're gonna address, as we normally do, a mailbag segment at the end. So any of you that are out there joining us, feel free to send us a question or comment. So as we kind of grew the combine, we made it into, not only the medical physicals, but anybody that was cleared medically. We do drills. We do a lot of different things. Probably the second most important thing next to the medical physicals were the interviews with the teams. And when we had more time with the players are there longer now, and they spend less time with the teams. It's just not the way it should be. But again, enough on my soapbox. When we were there, basically teams could spend maybe an hour or so with a player, really get a lot of good work done. And, it was a little bit better. Now everybody gets the player, and it's 15 minutes, and it's like it's like that speed dating for NFL draft prospects, if you will. You blow the horn and they move on, and you can't get a lot done. And so you leave there with not nearly the information that you used to in terms of the intel on the player. And you got to go to campus and sort it out. You got to go to pro day and sort it out. You got to bring your 30 visits into the facility and sort it out. It's not the most efficient way to do it, but it is what it is, to borrow a old tired saying. And that's kind of how we have to deal with it in the current environment. Well, when you look at what you get done, you still try to learn as much as you can about the player. you do try to uncover some things that maybe you have questions about the player. And you certainly, the workouts are relevant and are helpful, but it doesn't tell you everything. So, what's the purpose of the combine? Because if you don't work out, well, again, the medicals are everything. Medicals are everything. They really are. If we get some other stuff done, well, then, you know, so be it. If they don't, we accept it. We've tried different things over the years to make the combine better. I still serve on a committee, and I've kind of lost a lot of the arguments. But I believe the combine maybe should be a little bit later. I think we need to do our best. The genie's out of the bottle, so we're not going to make this non televised, and I don't think we needed to do that, take it away from TV. Nothing wrong with that. But I do think we need to limit all the player interviews that the players do. I think learning how to interview with the media is an important thing that they need to do. But I think what we need to do is allocate less time for that and more time with the teams. And I think we maybe could put in request of how we interview and how much times. And I think those things are going to be a better fit for the combine, or would be a better fit for the combine going forward. I think making the combine a little bit later, and it is a little bit later, would reduce the amount of need for the pro days being a bigger part of it. But, the end of the workouts. So the workouts are, again, less important than maybe people might think. But on to the workouts, what's relevant in the workouts? I'm not saying the workouts are not important. They are. And it's better if everybody were to work out in one location. If they're healthy enough to work out. The one thing about workout numbers and we got a couple of questions. We've got several questions already inside the chat room. The big thing to understand about workout numbers is that it all has to be translated to the surface that you're working out a guy out on. So the surface at Texas A&M is different than the one at LSU, which is different than the one at Alabama, which is different than the one at Syracuse or Michigan or USC. So you have to adjust for all of that. So there's no such thing. You say that guy ran 4.5. That's irrelevant. Ran 4.5 where? Now, he ran 4.5 at the combine relative to another guy running 4.5 at the combine. Now, that's relevant because they're both running on the same track. So you don't have to adjust and modify the times based upon the surface because it's the same surface. Now, you do need to factor in, and I do think I always encourage you guys, work out. If you're healthy, work out at the combine. Work out at the combine, because if you don't and you work out at your school, you're going to be expected to run in better, more pristine environment. You're going to be expected to run better. And what if you don't work out well there? What if you have a bad day? You got nothing to go. That's the only. It's kind of like taking the SAT test. Take it as many times as you're allowed to take it. Because if you have a bad day, the next day might be a better day. Take the best score. If you work out at the combine, if you run well, you work out well, you don't need to work out at your pro day. If you don't work out as well as you want at the combine, then you can work out at your pro day and you take the better numbers. But you're not fooling us. You may be fooling, people in the media that's promoting, hey, this guy ran 4.4. He ran 4.3. His time was better. Well, of course his time is better. His time is faster. I'll give you a story. This is one of many, but this is one because it's comical. So I drafted Keith Bullock out of Syracuse years ago when I was with the Titans. Pardon me. So Keith, we worked out players for years at the Manley Fieldhouse. That is where they played basketball at Syracuse before the Carrier Dome. So, over time, over years, how to convert times. And he ran like a 4.6 on the Manly surface. And so, he ended up being a guy that I drafted. And so I said, yeah, I said, that's good. That's about a 4.52 on the Indy surface. So, oh no, coach, that's four for you. Got to get. I said, no. You've ran what you ran, but you've got to convert the times. And so, anyway, long story short, um, when we drafted him and we had our initial day for rookies coming in, I said, hey, you want to run for me? He says, no. I said, I still ran for you. Didn't give me credit. I said, you want to go run right now? I said, you come tomorrow when you're fresh and we'll run in the indoor facility. It's the same surface that they've got at the time as the RCA Dome. So I said, you're going to get a better feel for. I bet you run 4.52, 4.54, even though you're just as fast as you ran when you ran at Manly. The surface is going to be that much. Oh yeah, okay, I'll do it. So I got warmed up and stretched and everything, and he ran in the indoor surface at the Titans, our indoor facility, the Titans. Guess what he ran? Ran 4.52. He ran it like 3 times, and his best time was 4.52. And he understood then. So my point is, and you've got to be able to convert all the time. So when you hear about somebody running at the combine, those times are more valuable or more useful because they're more centrally located. It's all relative. So, one of the reasons why people ask me, well, if you got an electric time at the combine, why are all these scouts running with their handheld times? Because everything is relative. If I'm going to time a guy at Indy, yeah, we're going to have the electronic time. That's fine. But I got to time him the hand time because when I go to all these schools and work these guys out, they may not have electronic times. So I got a hand time. So I got to use comparatively speaking, a handheld time to time this player versus, an electronic time. Well, that's going to be a different time. So I want to make sure that, okay, I've got the electronic time at the combine. I've got the handheld time at the combine of what I timed them. Now when I go time another guy or the same guy, whatever the case may be, on the school workout, it's going to be a handheld time because there may not be an electronic time there. So that's why we do it. It's a comparative measure. It's not that it matters if you run 4.5 or 4.52 or 4.55. It's all relative, and that's really what's important. And the other thing about the numbers is that there's certain metrics we're looking for. At a certain position, you're looking for a certain time. For offensive and defensive linemen, it really has nothing to do with the 40-yard time. It's a 10-yard time. It's a 20-yard split. It's also the 3-cone drill and the 4-square drill. Those are the times that matter. But again, they're going to be different depending on the surface that you run. So those are the big things to keep in mind. So when you hear about this guy did this and he blew this up this and he did this, keep in mind that it's all relative to that. The other thing that's changed over the years is that the combine has become the most centrally located convention for the NFL. For example, we don't really get going to, I got to go this weekend because we've got the personnel director meetings. The head coaches have their meetings. The trainers have their meetings. The video directors have their meetings. The equipment men have their meetings. Everybody associated with the league is there. You're going to have everybody there at that moment, all the coaches, all the scouts, all the front office people, because all the agents have their meetings. So in addition to the workouts, there's a whole lot of meetings because remember, what's the biggest thing happening pretty soon? March 16th is when I come back with you on March 9th, which is again not next Wednesday, but the Wednesday after. That's 1 week away from the start of the league year. So what happens in the meetings with agents and front office people, negotiators, is conversations about clients. It's the tampering before the legal tampering, if you will. And so there's a lot that goes on behind the scenes. So we're going to be covering it all for you at LandryFootball.com. All the scuttlebutt in our notebooks, what's going on, the talks and what's happening and this, that, and the other. And then obviously everything associated with the workout. So there's a lot of stuff behind the scenes. What we look for in the workouts, what we look for in the individual things. So one of the things that I did when I was running the combine is always look not just for different drills to run, but different medicals. So it's pretty clear that, to give you an idea of what happens, a player comes in, he arrives. He is picked up by the Indy Connection limousine service vans. Got vans that, we got about 10 vans. There are always at least 2 or 3 vans at the airport at the same location, same, place with signs in the airport. So players go to a certain place and it's really segmented and it's clearly defined. They know what to look for. They've got a little, check sheet to who to look for. It picks them up. If they pick them up, they're not hailing a cab and figuring out where to go. They immediately are taken to a special entrance in the back part of the hotel, which is a special check-in. And they get all of their gear and they get to their hotel room and everything, depending on what time they arrive. They're immediately put back on another van take to the hospital, which is right just a block away, 2 blocks away, for pre-exam x-rays. So all the players there, they have x-rays on every part of their body. So that is done before. And then you they come back and they have the orientation dinner and they eat and we talk to them and explain to them what's going to happen. So all these x-rays are done in advance of the physicals the next day. So not all the players come in at the same time. They come in shifts by groups and the positions. They're different groups in each position. So when you go through the process the next day, they get up at real early in the morning. They have a drug test. Then they go over by group to the convention center and they begin the physicals where all the x-rays from the night before, the day before, are there. And they go through basically like a conveyor line of all team doctors, the orthopedics, in here. And they go through every different little check and they are asked a lot of things. All the x-rays are looked at. Hey, we see a little scar tissue here. When did you have this knee injury? When did you have this hip? Whatever. This is most detailed physical you're ever going to have. This is where we found out that Garrison Hurst, coming out of Georgia, who had never had a knee injury, but he didn't have an ACL in his left knee. He didn't have surgery to take it out. He just was born without an ACL. So he never had an injury. It wasn't a problem. So you say, what's the big deal? Well, he didn't have a problem. It didn't bother him. It's a problem. It's a problem because even though he played high school and college, it was bone on bone. And so there were going to be arthritic changes earlier in his career. Wasn't going to tear an ACL in that knee. He didn't have one. But he was going to have a problem there eventually, and he did. And so it wasn't like it was a problem that he couldn't play now, but he was going to have longevity issues. So you get all of that done there. And then there are different stages you go to. And after you get all that done, if there's anything that props up, any concern through the x-rays or the exam, you go back to a special part of the hospital where you get an MRI. So you got something on a shoulder, you got something on a knee, you got something on an ankle, you got something on a hip, or whatever the case may be, they're doing an MRI. There are more MRIs done in 1 week at the Methodist Hospital in Indianapolis than they are, I'm told, in a 6-month period with a regular population. So we negotiated a better deal and the rate and all that, but so on and so forth. We do if one person has a question, we go and get an MRI, and all that information is shared. But one of the other things we tried to do is incorporate other things like Cybec testing and other testing that can measure the strength of your ligaments and your joints. Eye testing, a lot of visual acuity. As things have progressed over time, we do things like test hearing. We do things like testing, the not just the normal eyesight, but the ability to recognize things in a rapid fashion, because that determines in the eye, the left and right eye. I had a kid that I worked out at Kansas one year who was a corner, who was a really good player. But for some reason, he hadn't been tested, or they didn't make mention of it. But every time I worked him out, every time the ball was thrown over his right shoulder, he was fine. Every time it was thrown on his left shoulder, he was all over the place. He couldn't make a play on the ball to save his life. The problem was his left eye. And it was something with a muscle in his eye, and it was kind of a lazy eye situation. He just couldn't track the ball as well. And you can determine that through some of these tests. So I determine it through a workout. But you can determine this through a test, a laser light test to see things. And that helps you to determine, okay, are they things you can do to help it from a corrective standpoint, or does it need surgery? Or now they do wonderful things with LASIK to fix things. So there are a lot of ways to correct it, but you don't know there's a problem until you identify it. So there are a lot of things that we do that can determine a lot. And then we do things with regard to different intelligence tests. The Wonderlic test only measures the ability to read and learn and ascertain in a quick fashion what you just read. But that doesn't measure, it's not the only way to measure intelligence. Some guys are smart, but they may have dyslexia, or they may have a reading disability, but they can learn. So these tests help you to determine, okay, what is the story with this guy? He might be able to learn, but how does he learn? He might be a guy that he's got to be a visual learner. There are different ways that we teach now. It used to be in a big binder. You see let's see if I can point it correctly. You see those binders there? Those are binders, big old binders with playbooks. That's how you take that and you'd learn it, and that's fine. But now it's interactive. It's on an iPad, and guys learn a little bit better. But some guys have problems retaining. Some guys do it very well. We learn a lot from that. So those are the type of things that we learn in the process that's much more important, much more valuable than just the workout. But the workout is important. The workout measures certain physical qualities. If a guy's workout doesn't match his film, and 90% of the time it does, it's the 10% of the time that the workout doesn't match the film that we got a problem, and we got to figure it out. And so that's what we try to focus on. Are there any differentials? And then what are they? And let's go back to the film and figure it out. The guy's a really good athlete without pads. Why is he not a good athlete with pads? He should be. So is it a toughness issue? Is it a learning issue? Because some guys don't react as quick on the football field because assignment-wise they may be struggling. But athletically, you see it. So when people say, why don't you work out guys and time them in pads? Because you play football in pads. No, we already know what their football speed is because we watch them on tape and we watch them in person playing football. The workouts tell us athletically what a guy can do without pads. So they should match. When they don't match, that's telling. That's important. That allows to determine what it is. If you're I'm bad at cars, but what do they do now with cars today or any automobiles? They put it on a computer, right? And by putting it up there, you can learn here's where the problem is. So it may be the carburetor, it may be the transmission, it may be the whatever, the alternator that can diagnose where the problem is. This helps to segment and separate so that when we can put it back together, and then by separating it, you can figure out where the problems are so that when we put it back together, it could be in a little bit more congruent form. So those are the type of things we do. The workouts, we do everything, a lot more things than they ever show on TV. A flexibility test, which helps us a lot. Certainly the explosiveness with the broad jump and the vertical jump, they show some of that, not a lot. They all just show the 40. But the 3-cone drill is the most important drill that we utilize. And that and the short shuttle. That determines change of direction and body control, which is where football is mostly determined, particularly big guys. So there's a lot of things that we do. So as you looking and watching at your favorite player, and everybody's talking about who's moving up and down the board, a draft board that no team has set up yet, and you buy into all that hype, remember that it's not what it appears to be or what they purport it to be on TV. So keep that in mind. I want to get to got a bunch of your questions inside the chat room. So let's see. We got Rich says, what do you make of Juwan Howard, the Michigan College basketball coach who threw a punch at with the Wisconsin assistant, all because they called a timeout? Have saw anything similar in college or pro thoughts? Actually, I saw the end of that game. I was writing reports right here, and I was going to keep my eye out on the golf tournament, and I wanted to see some of that game, and I saw the end of it. My thoughts are irresponsible as a coach to act that way, whether it's football or basketball. In this case, it's talk how it played out. I think Juwan Howard was the one at fault here because, first of all, the game was decided. It was a large margin. He was frustrated that Wisconsin called a timeout, but Greg Card, the Wisconsin coach, called a timeout because Juwan Howard was pressing. So it's fine if you want to press late in the game. I know there's kind of a code where you don't press and you don't do that late in the game. Look, if it's coaching and you want to work on setting your press, even if the game is decided, great. You coaching for the next game. No problem with Juwan Howard pressing. But if you're going to press, and I got my guys, look, I coach basketball only at high school level. But in a situation like that, if my guys are not prepared, even though the game is out of reach, if you're going to press, then I'm going to call a timeout to get my guys ready to beat the press. If you are allowed to coach your team to press, I'm allowed to teach my guys how to beat the press. And then, but Juwan, who seemingly has had a few problems now, he cursed out Mark Turgeon, who's no longer the coach at Maryland. I think Greg Carter was trying to explain it. There were words there. I don't know what was said, but the bottom line is no excuse. I think he should have been suspended for the year, but that's what I see. In football, yeah, I've seen stuff. Absolutely. It's a little different. You're across the field. There's a lot of bleep yous. There's a lot of, uncomfortable conversations at midfield at times. I'm going to remember that. I thought that was, you see that, normally you deal with it. Normally it doesn't come to that degree. But you see that sometimes. You see it. If you're going to be a leader, you're going to operate and be a head coach in college or the NFL, you got to deal with it. Jim Harbaugh's been known to do a bunch of it. He had an issue with Jim Schwartz at midfield when he was with the Niners, and Jim Schwartz was with the Lions. He said something and slapped Schwartz in the back pretty hard. He did that when he was at Stanford um, to Pete Carroll one time. Um, he also had an issue with Rick Neuheisel at midfield. He's had a few issues there. So I don't know. I don't know. Maybe I'd say it's a Michigan thing. Jim's a Michigan man. He hadn't had any real problems since he's been at Michigan, but he did at Stanford and he did with the Niners. So I've seen it from time to time. Sightman said, "Good evening, Chris, and all. Appreciate you joining us there. Are the combine numbers official or unofficial as far as testing, like the 40 times, the bench press, and the three-cone drills?" Well, we kind of went over that. They're official because we have people. You can't, when you do the bench press, you have to bring it down, and you can't cheat on it and bounce it. So yeah, they're official there. But obviously, if you go and do it at a pro day and it's not monitored at a pro day, you could have a guy who has, if you see a guy that has 15 reps at 225 at the combine and suddenly 3 weeks later at his pro day has 25, it tells you that it wasn't monitored or officiated correctly. That's why I got it. It didn't get that much stronger. It's just how it was handled. So it's a little bit more official and a little bit more organized at the combine, which that's why we want to have all the guys work out, because it's apples to apples comparison as opposed to pro day where things are not as evenly done. And players think they're fooling people, but we have to adjust it. And we know that, hey, that's not necessarily what you truly are. When it comes to Belichick, as far as evaluations as a player, particularly on the defense, what does usually look for in the defensive end, defensive tackles, as well as linebackers? That's a long answer, but the quick answer, he wants guys that are smart. He wants guys that are tough. Defensive ends have to be strong at the point of attack. Defensive tackles have to be two-gap players. The defensive ends, again, in that system, have to play head up over a tackle much of the time, and the linebackers are more the rush guys. So that's what's a little bit different, is he plays a lot of 3-4 or two-gap principles even when he goes to 4-3. What was my assessment of C.O. Brocado as a scout? C.O. was a long-time scout that we worked together for years. C.O. was a character. He was kind of a workout guy that kind of worked those guys out, and kind of was a loud and a personality type guy, and just really good dude. Greg says, "Hi, Chris. Hope you're doing well. My question is, are the Cowboys seriously considering trading or releasing Amari Cooper? Lots of rumor floating out about Cooper lately. I think they would consider moving him for the right price. I think they're a little bit frustrated with his attitude. They're finding out why the Raiders were so willing to move on from him there. They're not going to move him for move's sake. One of the things about you got to be careful about letting stuff out of your building, as the Cowboys struggle with, because they are so media focused, is that when the words gets out that you are interested in potentially trading a guy, it hurts your trade value, hurts your leverage. Is it true the NFL is getting rid of the Wonderlic test, or that false? We have different tests. The Wonderlic test has changed over the years. We use a modified version as well as some other tests that measures, again, as I said earlier, a player's ability to read, to learn, to retain what he learned recently. Those are the things that we're looking for. We're not looking, Wonderlic is not an intelligence test. It's a recall test of your ability to read in a quick time and answer questions and think. That's important to learn. It's one way of learning. It's not the only way of learning. This is why when people say, what does that have to do with learning football? Well, it has a lot to do with how you're going to teach a player. So a lot of times even players, ex-players, don't really know why we do it, and that's a big part of it. What was my scouting evaluation of Alfred Williams out of Colorado, Trace Armstrong, Stephen Ridley, and Matt Castle? Alfred Williams came out of the Houston area. He went to Colorado. He was a good edge rusher. He was big. He was long. I thought he played the point of attack very well. Really, really good player. Trace Armstrong, who's now one of the great agents, coaching agents, Trace Armstrong was a really good high motor defensive tackle with a good first step. I thought he had a good counter move and really pretty good interior rusher, played outside some. Stephen Ridley was a running back at LSU, was a big guy, not a lot of moves, not a lot of burst, but was a good, tough after contact rusher. Matt Castle out of USC was intriguing, Rich, because he played mostly backup. But he was smart. He was a good pocket guy. He was a good decision maker. But he was a little bit limited. He had a good enough arm, but he was limited in terms of his ability to improvise, to slide in and out of the pocket, and make plays downfield. So some good questions. Again, we appreciate those of you that are joining us, uh, or whether on Facebook, Twitch, seems to be where most of the people have joined us today. Again, I want to tell you that I appreciate you joining us. Want to remind you again that you can join us not only on this show every week, the Landry Football Podcast. I will not be back with you next week because I'll be at the Combine. But join us at LandryFootball.com for all the latest, and I'll rejoin you 2 weeks from now on March 9th, right here. Also, join us check us out at Maroon Mega Media, where we'll be doing a lot of different things with the Aggie groups and the football fans there. Twitter Spaces, we're going to be doing stuff. We're certainly going to be doing a podcast. We'll do it at noon on Wednesdays right here. So joining us here on these platforms, but also at Maroon Mega Media on Facebook, on Twitter. And we're going to be putting together a website to where you will house all of our Texas A&M stuff. So we really appreciate and really are excited about the adventure that we're doing with those folks, partnering up with a lot of folks at 247 that cover the A&M program. So we are really excited about that. Hey, appreciate you joining us. Again, join us at LandryFootball.com, also at Landry Football on Twitter as well. Appreciate you joining us. And again, I hope that you have a great rest of the evening, and join us again next time for another edition of the Landry Football Podcast on LandryFootball.com.